What makes a K-pop album great design? To me, that's typography. There's a lot of great K-pop album designs out there. There are very few that use typography as a tool to convey their messages. But there are some, and I would love to highlight more and explore other design choices within K-pop albums. Typography is the arrangement of letters and words to create visual impact. It can express the personality and mood of an artist and their music. I'm going to show you some of my favorite typographic works within K-pop album designs. If you want to see me expand on this list, please leave some comments below. I would love to talk more about typographic work within K-pop albums. I think a lot of packaging design within K-pop lack a lot of creativity and really thoughtful design. Because the world of K-pop is super hyper consumer focused, groups, depending on their popularity and income, generate new albums and EPs 2 to 3 times a year, and sometimes even more. And so what that means is sometimes cutting corners around what we are able to produce. Some albums will get really great budgets in order to convey the tone, the musicality, and the artist's message. Now, I don't believe that you need to have a lot of money in order to make a great album design. I think using the principles and elements of design can really help push your album's messaging. And this is why I think typographic work within K-pop albums should be highlighted. But there are a select handful that I really admire and want to showcase today. First up, we have BTS's Oh Are You Late Too? With Oh You Are Late Too, BTS offers the message that you must find your happiness in your own life before it's too late. The lyrics brutally lay open reality as it delivers a bold ambition to a world that inflicts despair. I think that this album design is bold, it's direct, it's in your face, and I really love that they used only typography to get across this message. First, I did want to mention that I really do like the color palette that they chose. Using a really bright red and a white really provides a lot of contrast and also generates this idea of being rushed, being pushed, and almost this kind of cautionary feel. My only critique with the color choice is I probably would have leaned more into an orangey red rather than a true red. I think an orange would have relayed this message a lot clearer. Because when we think of red, we think of stop. And I think orange is kind of more cautionary. It's more about like tiptoeing and passing through, but still being very cautious. I think using a very clean serif here was really effective. I don't know what they used. It's probably a Helvetica, maybe a Montserrat, but it is a really good choice. If I was being really nitpicky here, I would have chose a slab serif. Serifs really do a good job at conveying a broader range of emotions, whereas a sans serif is really stiff and clinical feeling, which I don't necessarily think I can relate that to this album. But ultimately, really good album design and use of typography here. Next up, we have Younghae of Day6 with his new solo album, Letters with Notes. The album name, Letters with Notes, literally means letter written with notes, or letter with notes attached. This is the most romantic letter sent to the world by writer Younghae, who writes the lyrics and adds the melodies himself, for a total of 11 letters. I think that there's some really beautiful and delicate design choices here, which really help push the tone and the messages within the album so well. The use of an envelope is really clever and quite beautiful. It's very direct in telling you what it is. It's a letter. These are love letters. And this really ties into the overall tone and messages of the album. And if you notice, the actual envelope itself is a sheet of music that is folded. Again, really touching, really beautiful, and very clever. The use of Han's script, which could possibly be his own writing, however, I think is really effective here. It really brings that more romantic side to the album design and really exemplifies this emotional tone. I think not following a very strict grid was really purposeful here and also helps convey the message even further. You have a lot of the typography, again, that's handwritten, that is just kind of splayed along the one side of the envelope. Again, this is something that someone would do in real life. They're not really following the grid. And when you're putting a lot of emotion into something that you're writing, generally, it's not going to be so structured. So having this kind of asymmetrical layout for the typography, I think is so smart and beautiful. Next up, we have ENHYPEN's first album, Dimension Dilemma. After entering this multi-dimensional world where their values begin to collide, they recognize their desires for the first time and begin to question their identity. Hands tied in their new dilemma, the boys decide to do what they can for now, to run. The album's 3 visual concepts each respectively convey the members' upheaval of youth, the ensuing of chaos and inner turmoil, and the various new desires they are confronted with in this new world. I really enjoy the typographic treatment for this album design. I think to highlight the typographic treatment to the word dilemma by splicing it up, by slicing it, and also forming it into an X really helps illustrate the concept of this album and helps really perpetuate this idea of inner turmoil and chaos that they're experiencing. I really like the use of a serif here is able to encapsulate a lot of different emotions, especially when you're going through conflict in life. There's this really emotional tone here. There's a lot of conflict that is happening, a lot of ups and downs, and serifs really exemplify this very well. I think the color choices here are really great. First, by providing a lot of contrast and creating a lot of tension between this idea of chaos and the ups and downs of trying to find yourself in a new world. Because it isn't always about the dark side of it. There's some light too. So this kind of up and down, these contrasts between this really bright orange and this dark green, I think really lend well to creating the tone. Next up, we have Lucy's first album, Childhood. Childhood, which means childhood with freedom, innocence, and pure heart, is their motto and identity, containing Lucy's desires not to lose all of this, and is a word like original intention. In this album, they express freedom and energy through various attempts that are not limited to or defined by genre, and their unique, realistic, and warm lyrics. This album design really defines the messages within the album so well. I think what they're really trying to get across is this really childlike tone, this playful vibe, and some of these design choices really exemplify that. The rough scribble-like drawings really feel like a kid did this. And the various use of scripts and handwriting fonts really help push this tone even further. It truly feels like this is a notebook of an elementary student who may be trying to find themselves, trying to grasp onto some creativity in their life. Next up, we have Yang Yeosup, a member of Highlight, and their first album, Chocolate Box. Yang explained why he titled the album Chocolate Box, noting that he feels it's easiest to convey emotions through food. However, the singer also noted that he also just wanted to associate the word chocolate with his album. No more, no less. Sometimes when you're putting an album together, you might not have a clear direction. You might also intentionally want to do that. Could be because of the things that you're going through personally, and sometimes the themes can just be so simple, like a chocolate box. And it's possible that there's no correlation to the songs within the album and the design of the album itself. I still think that the design choices here are really lovely. The idea of creating a chocolate bar for the album design is so quaint and romantic. The typographic choices here really hit home the romantic side of this. It's really touching and precious. And then to go with a monochromatic color palette really exemplifies this even further and helps push this kind of somber tone. Ultimately, when most people think of chocolate boxes, you think of Valentine's Day, you think of a romantic date, you think of indulging yourself, and I really like this idea of an album being about a chocolate box. There's so many different varieties of chocolate. You get to take your time trying each one to kind of indulge in the different notes that the chocolate has, and I think that's a really good analogy to bring to an album. So some really great design choices here and such a loving and touching album. Next up, we have Cravity's fifth album, Masterpiece. Masterpiece brings together the best of Cravity's signature upbeat and youthful energetic sound, all while highlighting the message of paving your own path and writing your own story. It's a message that the group has always embodied on their journey so far, and one that they hope to inspire their fans. I love albums and specifically this album, that uses only typography to establish their tone. I admire that the grid allows each typographic element to perfectly fit within each other. There's a great use of different serifs and sans serifs that really help push this idea of carving your own path and creating this really dynamic and energetic side. And like most paths, nothing's linear. There's ups and downs, there's bumps and hills, and these design choices really help push that message. And to further emphasize the tone, the typographic elements use a lot of different weights and sizes, which helps create a lot of flow and rhythm and ultimately hierarchy and direction. I think if I was being a little nitpicky, I would work on the hierarchy a little bit. I think the album version probably shouldn't be the largest piece of information. And on all three versions, you notice that that is the largest body of copy. I probably would have made Masterpiece the highest, followed by the album version. I think the piece version is probably the most effective in terms of conveying the tone and message, and that is in combination with the color palette. Having all three versions of the album sitting side by side really paint the full picture of the challenges that you might encounter while trying to figure life out and carve a path. The yellow and green version really helps push this idea of growth, harmony, and trust. The piece version really exemplifies this kind of playful, dynamic side, and the mono version evokes this more dark, somber, and challenging side. And lastly, we have GOT7's album, GOT7. The members said in an online press conference that the EP with 6 tracks is a true representation of GOT7, as they had a lot of input in creating and choosing the songs. They wanted to show their identity as GOT7 after leaving JYP and felt that they needed a new image. GOT7 is not just a 6-track EP, but a symbol of their struggles and success. It is a mini album that they have made on their own terms, dedicated to their loyal fans. I GOT7. After their departure from JYP, the members worked on their solo endeavors, then came back as a group to really stamp their presence within the industry as not only a group, but the influence that they have together. And the design choices for this album help push that. I don't think that this album is about changing themselves. I think it's more so about highlighting their strengths as a group and their unique voice and sound. Therefore, I think it makes perfect sense that they chose their brand identity as the album design. The use of their brand color and typography and their logo was clever and intentional. They used typography, specifically the names of the members and the title tracks, to illustrate and form the number 7. This reinforces the idea that they're still together, they're going nowhere, they haven't disbanded, and this is who they are. In addition, I really like the hierarchy that they used here. It creates direction and flow, and this design choice really helps exemplify the tone and the messages within the album. In addition, I really like the hierarchy that they used here. It creates direction and flow. Overall, I think it's a really great album design. There's a lot of great K-pop album designs out there, and I would love to highlight more and explore other design choices within K-pop albums. If you would love to see me talk about this more, leave a comment below.